Well, we ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
All right, let me introduce to you our next guest, Tyler Sweat. He is the Vice President of Growth at Second Front Systems, where he works to break down barriers between innovative technologies and national security organizations. He is also a technical advisor at Palace Advisors, a member of the National Security Advisory Board at Calypso AI, an advisor at GovCity, an advisor at Outland, and works with multiple early stage companies and entrepreneurs. And then in his free time, my goodness gracious, this is a busy man, and he's a graduate of the great United States Military Academy at West Point, former military officer. So delighted to welcome Tyler Sweat. Welcome, my friend. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Well, we're doing fine so far. Really excited to have you jump on board and be a part of this today. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
You're very welcome,
sir.
Nope, take it away.
All right. Are we going to have Mike join as well? Yep. So I will take over for the introduction. So I'll be joined today by Mike Brown, who, while he does not require an introduction, I will attempt to give him one that does him justice. So Mike, as everyone knows, leads Defense Innovation Unit, who was sort of the first of what has now become many innovation units across DoD. Been responsible for the majority of the transformative innovation, changes in process, policy, speed, and impact for the department. He's also served as a presidential innovation advisor, CEO to Symantec and a number of other large companies. And we are delighted to have him today and be able to talk a little bit about the state of innovation, sort of where we're going in the future, and maybe some key opportunities going forward. So Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here, Tyler. Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. So open it up with sort of a state of the enterprise. So we're in the 6th year of DIU, a lot of sort of evolutions. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on sort of where you are now and maybe where you're looking to go into the future and what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're pretty pleased with where we've come in the past 6 years. I think we've started over 100 projects at this time. We've increased our transition rate, which means how often do we start a project and it really ends up as capability in warfighters' hands. That's up to about 50% now, and we're looking to get that up closer to 70%. Some projects that we start, the commercial solution maybe doesn't work in a military application, so I expect some of that. But really the friction we're seeing in terms of increasing that transition rate has to do with budgeting issues. The budget process for the federal government, for DoD, is 3 years in the making. So sometimes our solutions companies that we're working with have a product cycle that's well within 3 years. So often we have to work to make sure that the budgeting is lined up. We're working with many more companies than we ever have. We've written about 230 contracts at this point, influenced about $1.5 billion of procurement. Last year, we had 1,000 different submissions for the projects that we did. We have about 25 or 30 projects underway at any one time. So on average, 40 companies submitting for every project. We've added to what we're doing. Maybe we can talk about that. National Security Innovation Capital allows us to get early stage hardware companies funded. And also National Security Innovation Network is part of DIU. That sponsors Hacking for Defense, X-Force fellowships, kind of our bridge from academia to the military. So a lot happening at DIU. We're pretty excited about the evolution over the past 6 years, and we think there's a lot more to go. We still feel like we're scratching the surface.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear you talk about some of the synchronization challenges between the pace at which commercial technology, or especially some of the earlier stage companies, are moving, and with which the department budgets. So we'll definitely come back to that because I know that is a recurring question. What I wanted to talk about a little bit is, I've heard you and others reference sort of DIU embracing a fast follower model. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what does that mean and how does that impact sort of the focus, the priority, and ultimately the culture and the behaviors of DIU?
Yeah, so if you look at what's happened in defense over the last 50 years, as we've all lived through that, defense has gone from many technologies where we were an early adopter, an investor. Really, the industry owes its start to the investment from the federal government and the Defense Department. That's true with GPS, it's true with semiconductors. But if you look at the 10 modernization priorities set out by my boss, the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, They're areas like artificial intelligence, cyber, autonomous systems. These are not technologies developed by the federal government. They may have their origin a long time ago in some work. I mean, DARPA started working on AI in the 1960s. But today, we're relying on all of the commercial innovation that's happening outside. So if we're not the first mover in these technologies, we are in some hypersonics or directed energy, those that are military specific, we're still the first mover. If you're not the first mover, you need to be a fast follower. Otherwise, you're way behind and you're not giving our warfighters access to the best of what the commercial world is offering. So this fast follower strategy is really meant to talk about speed. We need to move a lot faster to get access. And then we got to make it easier for companies to work with us. That's, of course, why DIU was set up. And we need to tackle in that the requirements process that DoD imposes. We don't really need that for commercial technology. We don't need to tell the market what to build. They've already built it. We need to address the budgeting impedance that we just talked about. We got to get that synced up. We really need the department to move a lot faster when they shift money to more urgent priorities. And we need some ongoing refresh of technology built in from the beginning. If you think about an area that we spent a lot of time working on, small drones, commercial companies continue to bring out new products. So we can't approach that like we do an aircraft carrier, where you're going to have a design and you might use that basic design for 40 years. We need to have a mindset that, no, we're going to qualify this round, and then we're going to move on and have another set of drones with the most current technology qualified and ready for the military in whatever that commercial cycle is. Maybe that's every 18 months. So that's a different mindset than we've often used in the military, where we're going to qualify something and we're one and done for 10, 20, or 30 years.
Yeah, transforming from an industrial age approach into more of a knowledge age approach is a tall task for any organization, especially one the size of DoD.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that a lot more succinctly than I did.
No, it's right though, and I mean, you know, on that sort of transition, right, where you're moving from an overly sort of bureaucratic, a predefined sort of set process that you're just going to continue to repeat. Two topics that I see coming up often are legal precedents for contracting. So once somebody's figured out a quicker way to move, how can we sort of diffuse that across the entity? And then reciprocity for accreditation, right? We often, the department throws around statistics. We've invested hundreds of millions or billions in these early stage companies, SBIRs and OTs. But when you go talk to those companies, they're not able to actually deliver their software because it's sitting somewhere waiting for accreditation, or everybody's pointing at a different AO. How can DIU start to maybe flatten some of those barriers or remove some of those barriers so we can actually get that transition into the warfighter's hands, not just into the department?
Yeah, it's a great point. So from a systematic approach, if we kind of extended what does a fast follower strategy mean to how we implement that at DoD, we'd be tackling these things. In the absence of having that done, we've got to kind of chip away at these one at a time and make sure we're providing that capability for companies. So just to give you a quick example. So on the contracting side, when we do a prototype project, which only means testing a solution in a military environment, and then do a production contract, a production OT, it's called, using the other transaction authority, that's available to everyone to use. So we've got to make sure that that's known. In fact, this year, DIU is starting a product catalog of the solutions we've already qualified, so that those around DoD can see what we've already done and take advantage of that. So we need to make sure that from a contracting standpoint, those production OTs already legally allow folks to do that, but practically, can they come on and place a task order on those OTs and get the capability? And especially for software, the continuous ability, continuous ATO is what we need, and that's being recognized in the department. So we need to start moving away from that. DIU just got the authority to be able to develop our own authority to operate ATOs. So we should be able to help companies on an ongoing basis with that. But of course, we'd like to see, especially in the software realm, this move to continuous ATO.
Yeah, it's a constant battle.
Right.
You know, risk versus security versus speed versus compliance. And it seems to vary widely from service to service. So love to hear that you guys are taking a leading role in that. On that note, since the birth, right, we opened sort of talking about the 6 years since DIU came to fruition. In the beginning, there was one. Now there are more than I can count. It feels like every day there's a new innovation or an X sort of popping up. How does DoD serves, how does DIU see its role there? And as we move forward, maybe an opportunity to provide a little bit more clarity for some of those private companies on what's the right point of entry? Where should you go with your innovation at sort of what phase? Because it can be a little overwhelming right now.
Yeah, well, DoD is the largest organization in the world. One thing that you learn working inside that you might not have had the impression when you were outside is it's decentralized. So that means that the Army has its own budget and process, and that might be different from Navy and Air Force, et cetera. So that's, I think, why you've seen some proliferation of the organizations. I think that speaks to the need for organizations like ours, and the fact that folks want to make sure that organizations are responsive to their parent organization. I view this as an opportunity for us to collaborate across, and that's what we're trying to do. Share best practices, be open about what projects we're doing. Let's try not to duplicate, but if we can work together, let's do that. I'll give you two quick examples. So the Chief of Naval Operations is setting up an unmanned naval task force to understand what autonomy can do for the Navy, a lot. And we're working with Naval X there because, as you might expect, the CNO would bring in Naval X. And then when we've offered, what can we do to provide a window into the commercial world, companies that could help the DIU, what we call CSO, Commercial Solutions Opening Process, how can we qualify what's out there? So anything we can do there to support that, we're excited to do. Another quick example would be AFWorks. AFWorks has been phenomenally active. We love to see that. And we've decided between Colonel Nate Diller, who runs AFWorks, and myself, we really want companies to view AFWorks and DIU as two partnering organizations. You can come in either front door and we'll sort out for you what's the best path once you're inside. So you could start working with AFWorks. Naturally, they're going to be aligned to Air Force priorities. If your solution works great with Navy for NavAir, great. We'll take that on and take that to the Navy if that's not AFWorks's part of their mission or mandate. So we really want to make that simple rather than collapsing all the organizations into one, which probably wouldn't lead to a better outcome. Centralized at DoD doesn't mean you get something that's more agile and efficient. So we've just decided, let's talk to each other. Let's make sure we're working with the same database. We've agreed to co-locate in our offices as an example. And Nate and I meet probably once every other month to talk about what can we do to make sure that the partnership is even closer.
That's awesome. It's a great example of sort of finding personal relationships in practical ways to sort of bridge some of those barriers between. Love to hear that. So on sort of a positive note, right? Heard some news recently about Blue UAS. Sounds like there's some really good news to share. So would love to sort of hear an update on that from you.
Yeah, great. Well, we're excited. Blue UAS refers to U.S. or allied source of drones, U.S. or friendly sources, because China has really taken the lead in this market. One company, DJI, has 75% of the global market share. With other Chinese competitors, that's 90% of the world's market share for small drones. So we shouldn't be buying drones for the US military from China. That really doesn't make any sense. So we need to make sure that we're supporting US and allied sources. And we've done that both with qualifying 5 different vendors in an effort we call Blue UAS 1.0, and so we've harmonized some requirements across the department rather than having, back to what we were just talking about, the decentralized nature, having Army develop their special drone source and then Navy and then Air Force. Let's talk to each other up front. So we invited the other services to participate in an Army program of record, and in that way harmonized requirements, and then putting those on the GSA schedule made that available to all parts of the federal government. So we're excited about the fact that we would aggregate that buying power to deliver to some US and allied drone companies. We've also worked on components. The law Congress passes every year, the NDAA, prohibits us from using Chinese components in drones. So we've worked to make sure that the parts that we use satisfy that intent. and make sure we're developing the right components, flight controllers, gimbals, the other things that go into a drone. So we're just announcing Blue UAS 2.0. How can we make this better? We started with 5 drones. They pretty much fit a more narrow range of payload, time in the air. So now let's expand the capabilities. So back to the fast follower strategy. How do we continue to refresh this capability? Because since we did that work, there's been improvements from the drone manufacturers, which is fantastic. That's what we want.
Yep.
Let's make that available to the military. So Blue UAS 2.0 is both refreshing that work, plus expanding in terms of drones that handle different missions, might handle a heavier payload, might be able to dwell in the air longer, that sort of thing. So we're very excited to be launching Blue UAS 2.0 and give the military refresh technology and a wider set of capabilities.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on the success there. And I love to hear you to talk about allies as well, because I think so often we either focus internally on kind of cross-service collaboration, and it's a success if maybe it's cross-agency. And as we all know, we go to war with allies. So if we can find ways to promote interoperability, common sort of languages and tech foundations, that's only going to do us massive success in the future. It's going to be a great benefit. Yeah.
Allies are our asymmetric advantage relative to some of our adversaries that don't have an extensive list. And what better way to have interoperability than working with commercial technology?
Yep, I love it.
It's very much objectives in sync here.
Awesome. And then I think we've got 3 minutes left. So I want to give you one last question. NSEC. So same vein, right? Another new success. I think a lot of folks would love to hear sort of your vision for where it goes and sort of a brief kind of overview. And how can folks get involved?
Yeah, NSEC, National Security Innovation Capital, is really what drew me to DIU. It's an idea about how do we start funding more hardware companies. The venture capital industry does a marvelous job of funding software. That tends to be on average a more profitable investment for them. But the military needs hardware. We need batteries. We need quantum sensors. We need components for space. So this is an initiative that Congress just funded this past year. We got $15 million as a way to get this going. We've received 100 different applications from companies. We've invested in 9 different stages of the manufacturing and development process in areas from vacuum deposition, manufacturing in space. So think about how would we service satellites rather than put them up there and when they're done, have them fall back to Earth. To new battery technology, lithium sulfur, which has much more energy density than lithium ion batteries, to antennas that use quantum sensing techniques to give you a vast range of wavelengths that you're going to be able to detect simultaneously and in multiple directions. So some phenomenal innovation that's happening that comes from our national labs. Often federal government has funded some of this research. When the companies get formed and they're hardware versus software, we want to make sure they can turn to US sources of capital. And the idea behind NSEC is we don't intend to be the sole funder. We're looking for companies where their product or solution has commercial applications, and we can catalyze investment from private investors. Awesome. We just want the private market to see the water's fine, come on in. We've already dipped our toe in. We've signaled this is an important area. So we're looking for private investors to come in with us and make these companies successful. That's awesome.
And I like the sort of de-risking the thesis for those private investors, right? Showing that there's already some capital coming in. I think that's a great approach. So I know this is a sort of a quick one. Want to thank you. I think we got through a lot of really interesting sort of what's the long view at DIU? How are we looking at collaboration across the enterprise? Talking about interoperability with the allies, changing the way we ship software into the DoD and ultimately scale it, which I think sends a tremendous, on that note about de-risking for the VC community, I think that sends a tremendous message to the VC community that, hey, a defense thesis can be one you go after, right? There is a way to get that ROI. I want to say congrats on all your recent successes, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work together and collaborate. So thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Me too. You summarized what we're doing exactly. We're scaling. We're looking at how do we work with allies. What can we do to collaborate across DoD? So that really is where DIU is headed. Thanks for the opportunity this morning.
Heck yeah, thanks so much. And thanks to America's Future Series for hosting this event today and allowing us to chat. Really appreciate it.
And Tyler and Mitchell, thanks to both of you. That was outstanding. Just great stuff. Thanks, gentlemen. Stay safe. We appreciate it very, very much.